For 508 days, Hamas has been holding hostages in captivity in Gaza. 63 hostages remain in the terror dungeons as we're speaking. Hello, everyone. I'm Captain in Reserves Maya Bentwich. Today is February 25th, 2025, and this is the live daily briefing of the Israeli Citizen Spokesperson's Office. Over the last week, the world saw the true face of Hamas. Hamas's brutality against the Bibas family was unimaginable. They murdered their grandparents, kidnapped the father Yarden, and held him hostage in terror tunnels for nearly 500 days, and abducted the mother Shiri, 4-year-old Ariel, and 9-month-old baby Kfir. Hamas's monsters then murdered Shiri and her babies with their bare hands, and multi-acted their bodies, covered up the crime. In a grotesque display, Hamas staged a ceremony for the return of their remains, where they brought Gazan children to dance and celebrate the deaths of Jewish children. Hamas returned their bodies in coffins filled with propaganda, locked with keys that didn't fit, and as a sick trick, sent back the body of a Gazan woman back to Israel instead of Shiri. This cruelty exposes Hamas's true evil and their use of terror as a tool of psychological warfare. Think the non-Hamas Palestinian government is moderate? Think again. President Abbas promised to keep paying murderers even if we only had 1 cent left. Then he deleted the clip. Sneaky, right? 2 weeks ago, Abbas tried hiding the payments with some bookkeeping tricks. But here's the truth. Abbas sent billions to Hamas and other murderous terrorists. This sick program is called pay to slay. The more they murder, the bigger the paycheck. And get this, pay to slay payments are actually 4 times a Palestinian teacher's salary. Where are their priorities? This is the Fatah corrupt dictatorship governing Judea and Samaria, the West Bank. Abbas still hasn't condemned Hamas's October 7th massacre. Yet some countries want Abbas back in charge of Gaza. Swapping Hamas child killers for their Fatah accountants? That's not progress, that's madness. Israel's position here is clear. Gaza cannot be run by Hamas monsters or their Fatah murderers or founders. Tell your government no support for child murder, period. Israel told Syria's jihadi rulers to stay away, and that Israel will be sticking around. Israel's prime minister said, "We will not allow the forces of HTS, Chaya Tahrir al-Sham, or the new Syrian army to enter the area south of Damascus. Likewise, we will not tolerate any threat to the Druze community in southern Syria." Israel's foreign minister said Hamas is trying to create a new front in southern Syria. Southern Syria is the area of Israel's border along the strategic Golan Heights. It's also an area where the Druze minority live. Part of the area is called Mount Druze. Druze are viewed as religious dissenters by jihadis. Druze are viewed as allies by Israelis. Syria's previous Assad regime and their Hezbollah allies are the Iranian regime's proxies. Assad and Hezbollah were part of Iran's Shia axis, burning a ring of fire around Israel. Iran's proxies are weakened, but Iran's enemies are not necessarily Israel's friends. Syria's new Sunni rulers are jihadis, former ISIS, and al-Qaeda terrorists. They can threaten Israel and religious minorities like the Druze. They are also allied with Hamas backers, Turkey and Qatar. That is why Israel is keeping a buffer zone along the Golan Heights indefinitely. That is why Israel is working to protect the Druze community. Whether in Gaza or Lebanon or Yemen or Syria, Israel will push back any jihadis, Sunni or Shia, who try to harm our people. There's a story in the New York Times that is getting a lot of attention. The headline is Hamas's official express reservations about October 7th attack on Israel. It's about Musa Abu Marzouk, a senior Hamas leader based in Qatar. He said that if he had known what the consequences for the October 7th massacre would have been, he would not have supported it. He claimed that he was unaware of the specific plans for the October 7th massacre and that he had only endorsed the general strategy of attacking Israel. Last year, he said similar comments in an interview in Arabic media. It's nothing new. What he's basically saying is nobody could have predicted that Hamas's invasion, massacre, rape, taking children and grandparents as hostages would have sparked such a strong response from Israel. That is crazy. This is what you should have known about Musa Abu Marzouk. He's a senior Hamas leader. He seeks the violent destruction of Israel and the genocide of the Jewish people. These are Hamas's goals, and Abu Marzouk is completely in line with them. Hamas must be removed from the power, and all its leaders should be put on trial for war crimes and crimes against humanity. Now let's take some questions from our audience watching live on social media.
Thank you, Maya. Our first question comes from Instagram. What's the situation with Hamas and the hostage ransom deal going forward?
Great question. So here's where things stand right now with the hostage ransom deal. Hamas says it won't release more hostages unless Israel frees 600 terrorists. That is something that Israel won't do while Hamas holds dead hostages, parades, forces them to kiss their captive's head, or has horrifying body mix-ups. At the same time, Israel is trying to extend the deal, phase 1, 42 days to maximize living hostages return now, because we need them back home now. Officials said an extension might see the release of 4 male hostages, all fathers, and other critically wounded hostages, in exchange for keeping a ceasefire during next week's Ramadan. My main takeaway is that we cannot trust Hamas to be anything but cruel, but hopefully they can be forced to let some of these hostages leave after 500 days in captivity.
Thank you. Our next question comes from X. Do we know anything about the conditions of the recently released hostages?
Listen, just from last week's release, we've seen Avera Mengistu and Hisham al-Sayad that were held in Hamas captivity for around a decade. Both suffer from mental health conditions. And actually, Hisham's father described his son as broken and in severe condition, barely able to speak. He condemned Hamas, by the way, for exploiting Hisham's mental illness for political purposes, and he criticized the Arab world's silence, once again, calling out their inaction against the murderers and kidnappers. Omer Shem Tov was confined alone in a tunnel for 450 days after his friends were released. These are the conditions that we're talking about. Elia Cohen was handcuffed and deprived of food while the terrorists ate in front of him. They then force-fed him before his release so he would appear healthier, which is extremely medically dangerous, especially after starvation. The hostages were subjected to torturous release ceremonies even before their release, and the time they forced Omer Shem Tov, who they stole and tortured for 505 days, as I previously mentioned, to kiss his Hamas capturer's head, Hamas forced Israeli hostage Guy Gilboa Dalal and Eviatar David, who are still being held hostage as we're speaking, to come watch the release ceremony for other captives and film them as they beg to be saved. This is once again Hamas's psychological terror. This is the conditions of the hostages, even with their release. And I think that this is what we need to know, and this is what we need to learn, because we now have live first-hand testimonies from the hostages that were released, and we need to bring them all back home now.
Thank you. This is our final question. Adina on Instagram asks, in your opinion, is eliminating Hamas really attainable?
That's a great question. I think that we need to detach the problem from the bottom. We need to get to the root of it. And as I mentioned, I think for the past, 10 minutes, the world needs to call out Hamas for what it is, and it needs to be dismantled. Hamas cannot be a ruler or a governor in Gaza. The world cannot support this mental view, and this is, again, the way that the Palestinian children are even being raised. This needs to be changed. So I believe there is a way to affect Hamas being dismantled, and that is the way, and that is why I am here. That is why I hope you're here listening, and that is what we need to do. We need to stand out, speak out for what is right, And right now, for calling out Hamas for what it is and its backers and its supporters, because this is the truth. We all know it. So thank you all. That's all that we have time for. Thank you for tuning in. We'll be back tomorrow at 3 p.m. Israel time, 8 a.m. EST. Thank you for watching.